I stood in front of the mirror in my tiny Manhattan apartment, smoothing my tie one last time. I'm Hudson Wright, 35 years old, and today is the day I officially meet my future in-laws. I'm not the flashy type, so the suit I chose was simple, dark gray, bought off the rack at a regular store, nothing designer. No flowers, no extravagant gifts. I figured that if they were going to accept me, they should accept the real me, not some polished facade. My heart was pounding, but I tried to stay calm. This was a huge turning point in my life, and I didn't want to mess it up. My fiancée, Ruby Pattinson, walked into the room. Her smile always warmed me, but today it carried a trace of worry. She's 28, with long brown hair and deep green eyes, the woman who changed my entire world. We met 2 years ago at a financial conference, and from that moment, love grew naturally, quietly, beautifully. "Hudson, are you ready?" she asked softly, though I could hear the nervousness in her voice. I nodded and pulled her into a tight hug. "I'm fine, don't worry about me." Before we left, Ruby pulled me down onto the sofa and held my hands like she was afraid to let go. Her eyes were clearly anxious. "Listen to me. My parents aren't easy," she whispered. "My dad, Robert Pattinson, is 62. He cares about social status above everything. To him, everything has to serve the family's interests first." She hesitated, then continued, "And my mom, Kennedy Pattinson, is even stricter and more pragmatic. She's obsessed with marrying within one's class. In her mind, two people have to be truly equal, truly worthy of each other to be together." I listened carefully, trying to memorize every word. I knew her family was wealthy and powerful, but I hadn't realized how rigid they were. "Don't worry, I'll do my best," I whispered. But a quiet unease was already creeping in. Would they ever accept someone like me, just an ordinary financial consultant? We got into my old beat-up car, nothing luxurious, just functional, and headed toward the Hamptons on Long Island. The 2-hour drive felt endless. Ruby sat beside me, holding my hand tightly, but we were mostly silent. I tried to stay relaxed, told a few light work stories, but my mind was racing. "Do you think they'll like me?" I asked half-jokingly. Ruby gave a weak smile. "I hope so. But even if they don't, we still have each other." Her words comforted me, but the dark cloud of worry hung over us. When we turned onto the private road leading to the Pattinson estate, I was stunned. The grounds were immense, manicured trees, a sparkling pool, and a gleaming white mansion that looked like a palace. This was the world of the ultra-wealthy, a world I, a middle-class guy, had never belonged to. We parked, and Mr. and Mrs. Pattinson came out to greet us. They were impeccably dressed, Robert tall and imposing in an expensive suit, Kennedy elegant in a long dress. But their smiles were formal, cold, no warmth at all for a man meeting his future in-laws. "Hello? You must be Hudson," Robert said, shaking my hand mechanically. Kennedy only nodded, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. We stepped inside, and dinner began. The dining room was enormous, a long table covered in pristine white linen, silver cutlery gleaming. I sat beside Ruby, forcing a smile. But from the very first questions, Robert went on the attack. "What do you do for a living, Hudson?" he asked, tone flat but probing. "I'm a financial consultant, sir. I work for a small firm in Manhattan." Robert raised an eyebrow and smirked. "Financial consultant? Sounds nice, but is it really enough to step into our family? We need people with real standing, real influence." My chest tightened. His words hit like a punch, but I stayed polite and nodded. Kennedy was even more cutting. She eyed my suit, then asked about my background. "Where did you grow up? What do your parents do?" I gave a brief, honest answer. "Ordinary office worker parents, nothing wealthy." She smiled thinly, eyes full of implication. "Ah, so there's quite a class difference. We've always believed in marrying one's equal, you know. Love alone isn't enough. One must think long-term." Every word sliced into me. I felt like an outsider being judged inch by inch. Ruby sat beside me, face flushed, trying to defend me. "Mom, Hudson is a good man. He loves me." Kennedy just waved a hand. "Be quiet, Ruby. This is adult business." The dinner dragged on in suffocating tension. Conversation revolved only around the Pattinsons' business and connections. Robert bragged about major deals and international partners. Kennedy chimed in about high society galas. I tried to join in, asking about patents and global trading, the family's massive import-export empire. I heard you're expanding into Asia, sir? My question was ignored. Robert immediately turned to talking about the son of a wealthy friend. I was shut out, left to eat in silence while delicious food turned bitter in my mouth. My heart raced, sweat running down my back. This was supposed to be my introduction. Why did it feel like an interrogation? Ruby kept squeezing my hand under the table, her small gestures full of worry and helplessness. When Robert dropped yet another veiled comment about someone more suitable, Ruby finally snapped. She stood up. "Dad, why are you talking like that? Hudson is my choice." The room went dead silent for a moment. Robert's brow furrowed, his stern gaze sweeping over her. "Sit down, Ruby. Don't make this worse." Her attempts to defend me floated away like smoke. I felt completely powerless under their cold stares, yet I forced a smile so Ruby wouldn't worry more. The atmosphere was unbearable, and just when I thought I couldn't take another second, the dining room doors opened. A young man walked in, confident and impeccably dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. He carried the aura of someone born into power, slicked back hair, smug smile. My stomach dropped. Who was this? Robert and Kennedy's faces instantly transformed from cold to delighted. "Kyson, you made it," Robert exclaimed, standing to shake hands. Kennedy beamed. "Come in, dear, we were waiting for you." Kyson Witherspoon, 37, heir to the Witherspoon Group and International Logistics and Shipping Empire, longtime partners of the Pattinsons. I knew the name from Ruby, but I never expected him here. Kyson greeted them warmly like family. "Uncle Robert, Aunt Kennedy, sorry I'm late." Work was crazy. His voice was smooth, dripping with confidence. When his eyes flicked to me, there was no curiosity, no friendliness, just a quick, dismissive appraisal. The look of someone far above looking down. But when he looked at Ruby, the coldness melted into obvious possessiveness, as if she had always belonged to him. Ruby went pale and gripped my hand harder. Kennedy immediately pulled Ruby to her feet. "Ruby, come sit next to Kyson so you two can catch up." She deliberately rearranged the seating, pushing me to the far end of the table. I felt slapped in the face, but I couldn't react. Kyson sat beside Ruby without hesitation. "Ruby, it's been too long. How have you been?" he asked sweetly, completely ignoring me. Ruby answered curtly, eyes pleading toward me. From that moment, the entire dinner revolved around Kyson. His family empire, the Witherspoon Group's latest deals, the perfect synergy between the two families. Robert was thrilled. "Kyson, tell me about that new shipping project. We should definitely partner up." Kyson smiled smugly and talked at length while Ruby sat silent, head down. I had been turned into a complete outsider, relegated to the end of the table like an unwanted guest. Every word they spoke cut deeper, and I finally understood. Kyson's appearance was no coincidence. This was planned. My heart raced, dread rising. Ruby looked at me, eyes glistening with tears. I knew it then. The storm was coming. Dinner finally ended, but not in any way I had hoped. The plates sat cold on the table and the air was so heavy I could barely breathe. Robert Pattinson wiped his mouth with a pristine white napkin, pushed back his chair and stood, his gaze sweeping over everyone like a king issuing a decree. "Everyone, before we end tonight, I have something to make perfectly clear," he announced, voice low but commanding. Kennedy nodded beside him. Kyson leaned back in his chair, a smug half-smile on his lips. Ruby's hand tightened painfully around mine under the table. I could feel her trembling. I swallowed hard and waited. Robert looked straight into my eyes without blinking. "Hudson, you seem like a decent young man, I won't deny that. But I do not accept your relationship with Ruby. Not now. Not ever." The words struck like lightning out of a clear sky. I froze, mouth open, unable to speak. Ruby shot to her feet. "Dad, how can you say that?" He raised a hand to silence her and continued, "Quiet. This is a family decision. Ruby has been promised in marriage for a long time, to serve the alliance between our two conglomerates. The man chosen for her is Kyson Witherspoon." He gestured proudly toward Kyson as if unveiling a flawless business deal. My heart stopped. An arranged marriage? To that guy? Kyson stood smiling with arrogant confidence, the kind of smirk that made me want to punch him. That's right, Uncle Robert. I'm very much looking forward to officially becoming part of the family, he said smoothly, voice dripping with venomous charm. His eyes flicked to me, openly challenging, victorious in every gesture, from the familiar pat on Robert's shoulder to the deliberate smile he aimed at Ruby. Blood rushed to my head, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was not the moment to lose control. Ruby couldn't take it anymore. She rushed toward her father, face flushed with fury and despair. I won't accept this. I don't want to marry Kyson. I only love Hudson. This is my life, not a business transaction. Her voice echoed through the vast dining room, thick with tears. I was proud of her, but terrified at the same time. Robert and Kennedy exploded with rage. Robert slammed the table. You're impulsive and stupid. How dare you put your childish feelings above the interests and honor of this family? Who do you think you are to decide everything? Kennedy screeched. You shameless girl. Do you have any idea how much embarrassment you've caused us? This empire was built on decades of sweat, tears, and sacrifice, and now you want to destroy it all for some mediocre financial consultant who isn't even in our league? Their fury spread like wildfire. Robert stepped toward Ruby, face purple, hand raised as if to strike. You dare defy me? My stomach lurched. No. This could not happen. I surged forward, placing myself between them, shielding Ruby with my own body. Sir, please stop. Ruby is your daughter and I love her. No one is going to tear us apart. My voice shook, but it was firm. Ruby clung to my back, sobbing. For a second I felt like a hero, but I knew the real storm was only beginning. My actions were like pouring gasoline on the fire. All of Robert's rage turned toward me. You little bastard, how dare you interfere in my family's affairs? You're nothing but a schemer who used my daughter's feelings to climb the social ladder. You think you're worthy? You're destroying the patents and legacy, you greedy nobody. The insults rained down. Kennedy joined in. Exactly, you penniless trash. Get out of my house. I stood there, absorbing every blow, heart tearing apart. I wasn't scheming. I loved Ruby with everything I had. But to them, I was the enemy. The climax came faster than I expected. Robert turned to the security guards at the door. Throw this man out of my estate right now. Don't let him stay another minute. Two huge guards rushed in and grabbed my arms. I struggled, shouting Ruby's name. She screamed and tried to run after me, but Robert barked, Hold her back. Guards blocked her, pinning her in place while I was dragged toward the exit. I twisted for one last look, Ruby fighting, tears streaming down her face. My heart shattered. I was shoved outside. The heavy iron gate clanged shut behind me, separating us in the most brutal moment of all. I stood there in the dark, pounding the fence in humiliation, fear, and helplessness. How had everything gone so wrong? I drove back to Manhattan late that night, mind reeling. Rain started to fall as if the sky itself mourned with me. When I got home, I collapsed onto the sofa and called Ruby with shaking hands. The phone rang forever, then someone picked up. It wasn't Ruby. It was Kennedy. How dare you call here again? She snarled, voice dripping with contempt. Because of you, Ruby had the nerve to defy us. Robert is furious. He's locked her in the estate and won't let her take one step outside. She was breathing heavily, voice growing more vicious. Listen carefully. Don't call again. Don't look for Ruby again. You only make everything worse, you bastard. Before I could say a word, the line went dead with a cold click, severing the last thread of hope. The following days were hell. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every morning I called Ruby dozens of times, endless ringing, then blocked. Texts, emails, even handwritten letters, everything sank into silence. I felt trapped in glass, able to see her but unable to reach her. Is she okay? What are they doing to her? I couldn't take it anymore. On the third day, I drove back to the Hamptons, desperate to see her. The mansion loomed under the late afternoon sun, but the moment I reached the gate, 2 guards blocked me. Boss says no visitors. Get lost. They shoved me back. I begged, please, just 1 minute with Ruby. Useless. Then, one pouring afternoon after I had stood outside the gate for 4 hours in the rain, an old man limped out, the family's longtime butler, silver hair, kind but tired eyes. You're Hudson, aren't you? I've seen you waiting for hours. I nodded, pleading, Sir, please help me. I just need to know if Ruby is all right. He glanced around, then whispered, You really love her. Listen, the master has locked Miss Ruby in her room. Guards watch her around the clock. She can't contact anyone. She's refusing the arranged marriage, so she's basically under house arrest. The words hit me like thunder. Locked up. House arrest. My heart broke. Is she okay? The old man sighed. She stopped eating and drinking in protest. She looks very weak, son. I was devastated. Ruby was starving herself for us. Tears mixed with the rain. Please, tell her not to hurt herself. Tell her to stay strong and take care of her health. Tell her I love her 3,000. He nodded gently. I'll pass the message. Then he turned away, leaving me standing there with a fragile thread of hope amid crushing pain. Every time the phone rang, I lunged for it, praying it was her, but it never was. I thought about our future. Could we overcome this? Or was this the end? The tension rose, the suspense unbearable, waiting for a miracle. But deep inside, I knew the real fight had only just begun. That night, after receiving the message from the old butler, I dragged myself back to my modest apartment in Manhattan. Body utterly exhausted, but mind spinning without pause. I collapsed onto the sofa and stared out the window at the city lights twinkling like fake stars. Rain was still pattering outside, mingling with the constant honking from the street below. Every time I thought of Ruby locked in her room, refusing food and water in protest, my heart ached. She was sacrificing herself for us, for our love. And me? I was sitting here, powerless, doing nothing. One thought kept gnawing at me. Should I finally reveal the truth about who I really am? The truth that no one, not even Ruby, knows. I lit a cigarette, an old ugly habit I only allow myself when I'm under unbearable stress, and took a deep drag, trying to organize my thoughts. Would revealing my real identity save her? Or would it only make everything worse? The truth is, I'm not just an ordinary financial consultant like everyone believes. I own and run Right Capital Partners, a highly respected international investment fund based in New York. My fund manages hundreds of millions of dollars for major global investors, Silicon Valley tech billionaires, European pension funds, sovereign wealth players. My personal monthly income regularly exceeds $50,000, sometimes doubles or triples when big deals close. I have real standing in the financial world. I'm quietly invited to the closed-door conferences where decisions that move entire economies are made, yet no one knows. I keep it completely hidden. I live so modestly it's almost bizarre compared to my peers. My apartment is a simple place in the East Village with old furniture. I have no luxury car, no flashy watches. I dress plainly, take the subway, and avoid every form of ostentation. Why? Because I despise that glittering world. I grew up in a middle-class family, watched my parents work themselves to the bone for a decent life, and I learned that money isn't everything. It can buy power, but it can't buy authenticity. I stubbed out the cigarette, stood up, and paced the room, torn by conflicting emotions. If I revealed everything now, Robert Pattinson would almost certainly change his tune. He worships status and family advantage, and I have more than enough of both. But then what? What would Ruby think? She fell in love with the real me. Or would she feel I had deceived her all along? I remembered our first meeting like a slow-motion film reel. It was 2 years ago at an institutional investment conference in Midtown Manhattan. The hall was packed with expensive suits and talk of stocks and bonds. I sat in the back row, trying not to stand out, even though my fund was managing a massive Asian allocation at the time. Ruby took the microphone during Q&A to ask about long-term investment risk. She looked gentle, long brown hair, warm smile, but her question was razor-sharp and intelligent. The entire room went quiet. "Sir, how do you balance profit with ethical investing?" she asked, and I was instantly captivated. She was dressed simply, no flashy jewelry, but I knew from the program that she was the daughter of Robert Pattinson, the import-export titan who controlled Pattinson Global Trading, a multi-billion-dollar empire spanning Asia to Europe. I had studied his company for years through my fund's research. Yet when I approached her afterward for coffee, I revealed nothing. We started with a simple cup at a nearby cafe. "Your question today was brilliant. It's what made me notice you from the very first second," I told her. She laughed softly. "Thank you. I was just curious." From that moment, everything grew naturally. I kept my real life completely hidden. To Ruby, I was just an ordinary financial consultant working at a small firm, earning just enough to get by. I wanted it that way. I wanted to be loved for who I am, not for money or status. I was afraid that if she knew, everything would change, that our relationship would become tainted by the same transactional world her family lived in. Our love deepened through simple dates, walks in Brooklyn parks, hot dogs from street carts, late-night talks in tiny cafes. We shared real things. I told her about my suburban New York childhood and how my parents taught me the value of honest work. She opened up about the pressure of always having to be perfect to uphold the family name. Those honest conversations brought us closer in the most genuine way. One rainy evening, she hugged me tightly and said, "You're so different from everyone I've ever met. You're one of the few people who lives true to himself." In that moment, I almost told her everything, but I stayed silent. I was terrified of losing the purity we had. Our love grew until one spring evening under blooming cherry trees in Central Park, we secretly got engaged. No diamond ring, just a private promise. "I choose to love you for the rest of my life, not for status, only for who you are." We hadn't told either family yet. I didn't want a spectacle, and Ruby was afraid of her parents' reaction. Now, with our love torn apart by force, I felt more trapped than ever. I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, mind in chaos. If I revealed my true identity now, I could probably negotiate with Robert using pure financial power. My fund could invest in Pattinson Global Trading and create the exact alliance he dreamed of. But then what? Would Ruby forgive the deception? Or would she think I was no different from Kyson, someone who buys love with money? My heart pounded as I wrestled with the decision that could change everything. The days that followed were a living nightmare. I tried every possible way to reach Ruby, but nothing worked. I called from unknown numbers, sent anonymous emails, even paid a florist to deliver flowers to the estate in the hope of slipping in a note. Nothing got past the Pattinson family's ironclad security. Every time I drove to the Hamptons just to be stopped at the gate, another cut was carved into my heart. The old butler, reluctant ally of mine, the butler, occasionally slipped me a message. "The young miss is still holding on, but the master is watching her very closely." Those words were drops of water in the desert, yet nowhere near enough to quench the fear burning inside me. I wandered Manhattan for hours under the rain, mind spinning with plans. Should I hire a lawyer? Report the confinement to the police? Then I laughed bitterly at myself. The Pattinsons had their own lawyers and connections in high places. To them, I was just an ordinary nobody, even though the truth was the opposite. The tension built. Every night I lay awake, heart racing, waiting for a miracle that never came. Then one morning, while I was sitting in my usual cafe near the office, idly scrolling my phone to kill time, the news hit me like a nightmare made real. Breaking alert on every screen. Lavish wedding of the decade. Pattinson and Witherspoon families seal alliance through marriage. Every outlet was flooded with photos. Kyson grinning triumphantly beside Robert and Ruby. Oh God, Ruby in a dazzling evening gown, smile stiff and hollow. I went numb. My hand shook so violently the coffee cup tipped and spilled everywhere. The headline named Ruby and Kyson as the couple. The last fragile threads of hope. The secret messages, the dreams of reunion, shattered like glass. I couldn't speak. The noisy cafe faded to silence. I stumbled outside, gasping for air, trying to hold back the pain ripping through my chest. Was this real? Ruby, had you given up? I couldn't wait another second. I jumped in the car and drove like a madman to the Hamptons, mind in chaos. The 2-hour drive felt eternal, every mile another question. Why are you doing this? Have you stopped believing in us? When I reached the estate, I pounded on the gate, shouting, "Ruby, come out and talk to me!" Guards rushed forward, but this time Kennedy appeared at the entrance, cold as an ice queen in her silk robe, hair perfectly pinned, eyes full of contempt. "What are you doing here? Haven't you caused enough trouble?" she snapped. I was panting. "Ma'am, the wedding news. Is it true? Where is Ruby right now?" She gave a scornful laugh. "Of course it's true. Ruby has come to her senses and accepted reality. She wants to end everything with you completely. Stop bothering her." I shook my head frantically. "No! Ruby would never give up that easily. We love each other." Kennedy pulled a handwritten note from her pocket and thrust it at me. "This is her final message to you. Read it and disappear." My hands trembled as I took it. Ruby's familiar handwriting, the soft flowing letters I had once kissed on love notes, twisted my heart. "Hudson, my love, I'm sorry. We can't go on. Please forget me and live well. Ruby." Just a few short lines, yet they extinguished every last spark of hope. I read them over and over, tears blurring the ink. Was this really her handwriting? Or was she forced? But the strokes were unmistakable. I collapsed to my knees right there at the gate, clutching the note, pain beyond words. Kennedy turned away, the gate clanged shut. I walked away in a daze, empty and broken, a dead man walking. For many nights after, I barely slept. My mind was haunted by images of Ruby, her smile, her warm hugs, and now the vision of her beside Kyson. I woke drenched in cold sweat, screaming into the dark. "Why, Ruby? Why are you doing this to me?" My tiny apartment became a prison. Every corner reminded me of her, the coffee mug she loved, the book she'd left behind. I tried drinking to forget, but it only made everything worse. Memories flooded in like a tide. Our first date at that little cafe where she laughed until she cried at my stupid jokes, the night spent whispering about our future. "We'll have kids, a little house," she had once said. Now everything was ashes. I wandered the night streets, the cold wind cutting my skin, but nothing compared to the pain inside. I waited desperately for a call, a text. Only silence answered. I kept asking myself, is she happy, or is she suffering too? The official wedding date was set just 2 weeks after the announcement. Under the lavish orchestration of both families, Ruby and Kyson's wedding was to be held at the ultra-luxurious Grand Seaside Resort in the Hamptons, the playground of the elite society. I read the reports. Outdoor reception, live orchestra, hundreds of high-profile guests. My heart bled imagining the scene. Of course, I wasn't invited, but I couldn't stay away. On the day of the wedding, I drove there in secret, parked far off, and watched from a distance behind the security fence and the stream of arriving guests. Security was airtight, black-suited guards everywhere. I hid behind a row of trees, heart hammering, waiting for one glimpse of her. The guests poured in. Gleaming limousines, women in glittering gowns, men with cigars and fake smiles. Festive atmosphere. For me, it felt like a funeral. Then I saw Ruby. She stepped out in a breathtaking wedding dress, pure white, long train flowing, diamonds sparkling in the sunlight. Kyson stood beside her in a perfect black tux, arm possessively around her waist. Ruby's face was calm, almost blank, as she climbed into the vintage Rolls-Royce bridal car. My heart tore in two. I whispered her name, tears streaming down my face. In that moment, I understood. Our love had been officially buried. The car rolled away amid applause. I turned, ran back to my own car, and vomited from sheer agony. Why, Ruby? Or was everything just an illusion? I drove back to Manhattan, mind blank, the world around me blurred. After the wedding, I fell into a long period of collapse. Outwardly, I tried to appear normal, going to work, meeting friends, forcing smiles, but inside, Ruby haunted me. Every morning I looked at her photo on my desk and whispered, "Are you really happy?" It took months, many long months, before I slowly began to recover. I told myself I had to keep living. I couldn't let the pain swallow me whole. I started running every morning, letting sweat wash away memories. I read books to fill my mind, but on lonely nights the longing still crashed over me like a tidal wave. Gradually I threw myself into work. As the head of an investment fund, I buried myself in huge deals, tech startup investments, negotiations with European partners, endless hours of market analysis. Numbers and charts became my anesthesia, dulling the loneliness. "Mr. Wright, this deal will bring in millions," my assistant would say. I nodded but felt nothing. Life regained a steady rhythm. Early mornings, meetings, quiet evenings in the apartment. On the outside, I looked strong again, but deep inside, my love for Ruby remained untouched, an unhealed scar. Some wounds, it seems, never fully close. A year had passed since Ruby's wedding day, and I had tried to bury that first love deep in my heart. Time is a strange medicine. It blurs the sharpest memories, but it never completely erases them. I still lived in Manhattan, still quietly ran Wright Capital Partners, but work was no longer an escape. It had become my actual life. I woke at 5 every morning, ran along the Hudson River to chase away dreams of Ruby, then dove into the office on Wall Street. The deals kept coming. I invested in a biotech startup that doubled my money. I negotiated a massive real estate fund with European partners. Money poured in. My reputation in the financial world soared, yet I remained invisible, still driving the same old car, still wearing off-the-rack suits. "Mr. Wright, I've never seen anyone so talented and so modest," my assistant once said. I only gave a faint smile. Talented? I was just surviving, drowning loneliness in numbers and charts. Occasionally the pain flared like an old scar, a song on the radio, a familiar scent on the street, and I saw Ruby in her wedding dress walking away without looking back. I told myself, "Let it go, Hudson." She chose a different path, but my heart knew it was a lie. I threw myself completely into the fund. From a few $100 million under management, we crossed $500 million with partners all over the globe. I flew to London for meetings with British banks, then back to New York to sign deals with Silicon Valley giants. 16-hour days, cold sandwiches at my desk, falling asleep with the laptop still open. Success restored a kind of balance, at least on the surface. Friends said, "You look good, man." I laughed it off. Just working out, nothing special. But at night, when the city slept, I sat by the window watching the crowds below and wondered, how is Ruby now? Does she ever think of me? Is she happy with Kyson? A quiet dread crept in, but I pushed it away. Stop thinking about her, I told myself, and buried myself deeper in work. Then one afternoon, while I was in my apartment reviewing weekend financial reports, the doorbell rang. I frowned. Almost no one ever visited me, especially this late. I opened the door and nearly froze. Robert and Kennedy Pattinson stood there, looking gaunt and exhausted, nothing like the arrogant, icy couple I remembered. Robert was thinner, his silver beard unkempt, suit wrinkled as if thrown on in a hurry. Kennedy, once so elegant with her pearl necklace, now had red-rimmed eyes and hollow cheeks. They looked like ghosts from the past, stripped of all their former authority. My heart pounded. Why were they here? Was something wrong with Ruby? I tried to stay calm, but my voice shook slightly. What brings you here? They looked at me with pleading, almost timid eyes, so different from the contempt I once knew. Robert spoke first, voice hoarse. "Hudson, we need to talk privately. Please let us in." Kennedy nodded, clutching her handbag as if afraid to let go. I stood stunned for a second, memories of that humiliating dinner flooding back. The insults, the ejection. But then I stepped aside and let them in, the silence heavy as a courtroom. We sat on the sofa. The air was thick. I poured water with slightly trembling hands. "Have some water." "Now." Tell me. I'm listening. Robert took a deep breath and began recounting everything that had happened in the year since Ruby's arranged marriage. His voice wavered. The once confident tycoon was gone. Hudson, you can't imagine. At first, after the wedding, everything looked perfect from the outside. Pattinson Global Trading and Witherspoon Group joined forces. Huge contracts rolled in. Asian shipping routes, cross-border logistics, millions flowing every month. He sighed heavily, eyes downcast, all hardness vanished. I really believed I had done the right thing, that sacrificing Ruby's happiness was the price to protect the family empire. Kennedy continued, choking up, eyes red. We thought it was the perfect alliance. Kyson said all the right things, made big promises. For a while it really did look good, at least on the surface. Then Robert's face darkened, but it was all a setup from the beginning. Kyson and his family had been planting people inside our company, heads of finance, logistics directors. Step by step, he took control of key departments and redirected information to his side. I listened, pulse quickening. The lucrative contracts, the golden shipping lanes, were quietly shifted to Witherspoon Group, leaving Pattinson with only risky, loss-making deals and even fake contracts to hide the theft. Robert gave details. A $50 million contract with a Chinese partner that should have been ours was manipulated and sent to his company. We were left with scraps and massive legal exposure. Because he trusted his son-in-law and the family alliance, Robert had let his guard down completely. He gave a bitter laugh. I thought he was family. Who would have guessed? When clients began walking away, contracts canceled, partners pulling capital, banks calling in loans at punishing rates, Robert finally realized he had been trapped. My family company has been bled dry, Hudson. Debt is crushing us. The stock is in free fall. We're on the verge of bankruptcy with no way out. At his lowest point, sleepless nights, Kennedy in tears, Kyson appeared like a savior, offering to rescue them by merging Pattinson Global Trading into the Witherspoon Group, with him taking full control. He said it was the only way to save the company, Robert said bitterly, but really he just wanted to swallow us whole. Only now did I see Kyson's true ambition. Not just a marriage alliance, but a calculated takeover of the entire Pattinson empire, using Ruby as bait. My fists clenched, rage mixing with the old pain. That smug bastard from a year ago was a viper. I kept my voice steady. And then, Robert's eyes filled with tears, something I never thought I'd see. There's more. It's about Ruby. His voice broke. Ruby has been living in hell, Hudson. Right after the wedding, Kyson started controlling her completely. He cut off all her social contacts, forbade her from going out alone, monitored every call. She's a prisoner in his mansion. Kennedy sobbed. He torments her psychologically. Insults, threats, total control. He tells her she's nothing but decoration. When she doesn't obey, he hits her. The word struck me like a physical blow. Beating her? My gentle, brilliant Ruby beaten? Old wounds ripped open, pain and fury surged through me. Robert continued, voice shaking. He openly keeps mistresses, brings them home, treats Ruby like furniture in his political marriage. She suffered alone, too afraid to tell anyone. During one rare escape while Kyson was away on business, Ruby came home and collapsed in front of her parents, broke down completely, revealing the nightmare. Nights crying alone, bruises on her body, constant terror. She fell to her knees and sobbed. "You pushed me into hell," Kennedy recounted, voice breaking. I sat frozen, rage and agony tearing me apart. The woman I had loved with all my heart was living in that kind of hell. Why didn't you get her out?" I asked, voice hoarse. Robert bowed his head. "We tried. But Kyson is too powerful now. And with the company about to collapse..." He looked up at me, eyes pleading. "Hudson, you are our last hope." The tension spiked like a bomb about to explode. My heart raced, old love and new fury colliding. What would happen next? I took a deep breath, waiting. I sat in complete silence as they told the entire story. From the expressions on their faces to the tremor in their voices, I could tell Robert and Kennedy Pattinson were not lying. Every ounce of suffering and desperation was real. Robert's hands shook as he described the manipulated contracts. Kennedy kept wiping away tears when she spoke of Ruby. The air in my small apartment felt so thick I could hardly breathe, as though the past had rushed back in and was strangling the present. I sat motionless on the sofa, knuckles white around the water glass, absorbing every detail. I had already heard whispers about Pattinson Global Trading's decline through the financial reports my fund analyzed and the rumors circulating on Wall Street. I had assumed it was a temporary downturn, but I never imagined the company was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. Robert spoke of sleepless nights staring at blood-red balance sheets. Kennedy wept over the future of their dynasty. I looked at them, once untouchable titans of power, now reduced to two broken, haggard shadows, and felt a storm of pity and anger swirling inside me. After a long pause, when Robert stopped to catch his breath, I asked directly, voice calm but probing, "Sir, ma'am, I understand everything you've told me, but why come to me? In your eyes, I'm just an ordinary financial consultant, someone with no ability to pull the Pattinson empire out of this crisis, right?" I stared straight into their eyes, waiting. My heart pounded. I knew the answer would change everything. Robert and Kennedy exchanged a glance. Robert cleared his throat, voice pleading, "Hudson, you're not the man we thought you were. Recently, quite by accident, we learned your real identity in the investment world," Kennedy added, voice trembling. "We heard from an old business contact. You run a major fund, right? Capital Partners, isn't that right? You manage hundreds of millions of dollars with ties to the biggest investors on the planet. You have the financial strength and the network to save our company." The words exploded in my head like a bomb. They knew. I had hidden that identity for years, lived modestly to avoid prying eyes, and now the very people who once despised me had uncovered it. I sat motionless, trying to process. Robert continued, voice heavy with open desperation. "Hudson, we truly have no other way out. We beg you, please inject capital to save Pattinson Global Trading. Only you can restructure the company, pull us back from the brink, bring in new partners." His voice cracked at the end. "But more important than anything, please save Ruby. She's slowly dying in that hellish marriage. We're powerless against Kyson." Kennedy nodded silently, tears streaming down her cheeks, voice shaking with hopelessness. "You're the only one who can do this, Hudson. For Ruby, and for everything we've lost. Please." Hearing this, every memory of that humiliating dinner flooded back. The vast dining room in the Hamptons, Robert's sneer when he asked about my job, Kennedy's judgmental stare at my cheap suit, and then Kyson walking in, turning me into a nobody. The insults, schemer, social climber, still cut like knives whenever I remembered them. Anger flared inside me, hot and fierce, yet my face remained ice cold. I refused to show weakness in front of them. "Sir, ma'am," I said slowly, every word sharp and deliberate, "it was you who insulted me, who looked down on me because of so-called class differences. You used your power to force us apart, had me thrown out of your estate like trash." I paused, eyes locked on theirs. "And now, when your company is collapsing and your daughter is living in hell, you come begging me for help? Isn't that a little absurd?" I took a deep breath and continued, voice low with bitterness. "And Ruby. She accepted that marriage. She wrote that goodbye letter in her own hand. So why are you suddenly putting all the responsibility on me? To you, what am I exactly? The man you once despised, or just a tool to save yourselves?" My words cut like blades. Robert and Kennedy could no longer keep their composure. Their faces went pale, and then, in a moment that stunned me, both of them dropped to their knees in front of me. Robert Pattinson, the once mighty tycoon, knelt on my floor, head bowed. Kennedy burst into sobs, hands covering her face, all traces of former arrogance gone. "Hudson, we beg you. We were wrong," Robert cried, voice breaking. Kennedy sobbed uncontrollably. Back then, Ruby fought for you with her life. She truly loved you, Hudson. But Robert threatened her. He told her that if she didn't leave you, he would destroy your career completely, use every connection to ruin you, take everything you had. She looked up at me, eyes swollen. Ruby cried for days, but she chose to sacrifice herself to protect you. That letter, she was forced to write it. We made her. The revelation hit me like lightning. Every doubt and resentment I had carried for the past year collapsed like a rotten building. Ruby had never betrayed me. She had never turned her back on our love. Instead, she had given up her own happiness to shield me, to protect the life and career she believed belonged to just an ordinary consultant. My heart ached so fiercely I could barely breathe, as though someone were crushing it. The image of Ruby in her wedding dress, that forced smile, suddenly became crystal clear. Not surrender, but silent agony. I loved her so much that tears rolled down my face without me realizing. Rage and grief tearing me apart at the thought of the beatings, the control, the living hell she had endured. How could you do that to her? I whispered, voice breaking. But I didn't let emotion make me agree instantly. This wasn't a game, this was a human life, love, justice. I stood and paced the room, trying to regain control. Robert and Kennedy remained on their knees, weeping and pleading. Hudson, forgive us. Save Ruby. Save our daughter. I looked at them, torn between wanting to scream and throw them out the way they once threw me out, and feeling pity and, above all, the love for Ruby that still burned. I need time to think, I said clearly, voice cold and firm. This isn't just about money or business. It's about a person's life. Go home. I'll contact you later. They rose, looking utterly defeated, and left my apartment in silence. The door closed. I collapsed onto the sofa, mind reeling. Tension surged. This decision would change everything. I would save Ruby, but on my terms. In the days following that fateful meeting, I was torn apart by an intense inner conflict. One half of me wanted to rush in and save Ruby immediately, pull her out of that marital hell, away from the bruises and fear Robert had described. I pictured holding her again, wiping away her tears, whispering that everything would be all right. But the other half could not forget the humiliation and wounds from the past. Robert's insults, schemer, social climber, Kennedy's sneer about class differences, and the scene of being thrown out of the estate like a stray dog, all of it still haunted me like deep, unhealed scars. Why should I save the very people who destroyed our love? Didn't they deserve this? I wandered Manhattan for hours under cold drizzle, searching for answers. My heart raced every time I thought of Ruby. What was she enduring right now? Another slap from Kyson? Or cruel words that made her curl up in a corner? Anxiety and worry intertwined, leaving me unable to eat or sleep. I wrestled endlessly between the mind of a businessman and the heart of a man who had once loved deeply. As a businessman, I recognized a golden opportunity. Invest in Pattinson Global Trading at its lowest point, take a large stake, restructure it, and reap enormous profits. My fund had more than enough capital and connections. I had done it with countless other companies. But my heart saw something else. This wasn't just a deal, this was Ruby. The woman who had sacrificed everything for me, who had endured hell to protect the ordinary financial consultant she thought I was. I remembered nights lying beside her while she whispered, "You are my everything." Where was she now? I sat in my Wall Street office, staring at the crowds below, mind in turmoil. The sleepless nights stretched on. I stayed up drinking black coffee, poring over Pattinson's financial reports for weaknesses, then slamming the laptop shut and clutching my head in pain. What should I do? I asked myself, heart pounding. The tension rose whenever I imagined confronting Kyson, how that smug bastard would fall. But if I failed, I would lose everything and Ruby would remain trapped. After many sleepless nights, as dawn crept through my apartment window, I finally made my decision. I would help, but on my terms. Not out of pity, but justice. I called Robert, voice calm. "Meet me at the cafe near my office. We'll talk." He agreed instantly, voice trembling with hope. When they arrived, still looking as broken as before, I led them to a quiet corner. The air was thick with tension. The clink of coffee spoons sounded like a countdown. In front of them, I declared, I agree to help the Pattinson family through this crisis. Robert and Kennedy nearly broke down with relief, as if a lifeline had just been thrown to them. Robert grasped my hand. Hudson, you are the savior of our entire family. Kennedy wept. You are our last hope. But I immediately laid out my conditions, voice ice cold. In return, I require 35% of Pattinson Global Trading shares and veto power over every major strategic decision. They froze, faces ashen. 35%? That would make me one of the most powerful people in the company, able to override Robert himself on anything important. Robert stammered. Hudson, are you sure? That's an enormous amount. Kennedy looked at her husband in alarm. But with no way out, banks closing in, partners fleeing, they had no choice. Robert exhaled heavily. We accept and place everything in your hands. My heart pounded with excitement. This was the turning point. I was stepping into the fight. The share transfer and strategic agreements were signed that same day at my lawyer's office, documents already prepared. I watched Robert's trembling hand sign his name and felt a mix of satisfaction and lingering pain. From that moment, I officially joined the board of Pattinson Global Trading as the second largest shareholder. The news spread quickly through financial circles. Hudson Wright makes major investment in Pattinson. But I kept it quiet, avoiding the press. Soon after, at an emergency board meeting, I was appointed CEO to take full operational control during the crisis. Robert nodded wearily. Hudson, from now on, everything is in your hands. We trust you. I sat in the CEO chair, looking out over the vast New York headquarters office, heart racing. It was time to begin. I launched a ruthless personnel overhaul at lightning speed. On day one, I summoned every senior executive and began a complete audit of the organization. We need transparency and clarity, I said firmly at the meeting. I brought in an independent audit team from my own fund and tore through every department, every major contract. Internal emails, financial reports, everything was examined. Kyson's planted operatives were quickly exposed, a logistics head leaking confidential data, a finance director signing fake contracts. I gathered evidence quietly, emails, recorded calls, and removed them without mercy. One morning, I called 3 of them into my office. You're fired. Security will escort you out. They went pale, stammering excuses, but I cut them off. Save it. I have all the proof. My pulse raced. I knew Kyson would soon feel the pressure. I immediately froze suspicious accounts and stopped the millions being siphoned to Witherspoon Group. High-risk and fraudulent contracts, the very tools Kyson had used to bleed Pattinson dry, were canceled or renegotiated. I worked with lawyers late into the night, combing through every clause. What needed to be voided was voided. What could be reclaimed triggered immediate legal action. The pressure was immense, but I refused to slow down. At the same time, I negotiated directly with banks to restructure debt and ease the financial strangulation. In conference calls, I introduced myself plainly. We have a new CEO. Hudson Wright speaking. My name carried weight. After tense moments of consideration, they agreed to extend terms. Cash flow began to breathe again. Simultaneously, I reached out to former clients and investors. I flew to London to meet European partners, to Singapore to renegotiate with Asian suppliers. Pattinson is being reborn under my leadership, I told them. When they learned I was Hudson Wright, the man with serious international credibility, many who had walked away began to return. A pivotal deal in Hong Kong. We'll sign again, they said. Revenue rose 20% in the first month. The stock turned green. As Pattinson regained its footing, I moved to the counterattack against Kyson Witherspoon. My heart pounded with anticipation. This was the real war. I launched aggressive pricing and supply chain strategies to seize back the critical logistics routes Witherspoon controlled. I slashed rates 15% on Asia-US shipping lanes using my fund's network to secure cheaper sources. Clients began switching. Your service is better. At the same time, I leveraged my global investor network to lock in exclusive contracts for Pattinson. One by one, Witherspoon's core revenue streams were cut off. A game-changing exclusive deal with a Chinese conglomerate was signed in silence but sent shockwaves. Soon afterward, Witherspoon officially lost tens of millions in annual revenue. I then fed the financial press airtight evidence of Witherspoon Group's past shady contracts, backed by independent audit reports. Violations were exposed to the public. A wave of suspicion swept the market. Regulators moved fast. The SEC opened a formal investigation and banks immediately tightened credit to Witherspoon. In a short time, Kyson's financial empire began to crack at its foundation. Under crushing financial pressure and severe reputational damage, the company fell into internal chaos. Senior staff resigned in droves. The stock plunged over 40% in weeks. Kyson called Robert in a rage. Robert replied calmly, "Ask Hudson." Step by step, I reclaimed Pattinson Global Trading's position in the market. New contracts poured in, cash flow surged, credibility soared, and the company grew stronger than ever. Ruby's family was in awe of my ability and resolve, yet they carried deep remorse for their past sins. Robert said many times, "You really are extraordinary, Hudson. We were so wrong to judge you by appearances." Kennedy looked at me with guilt. "Thank you for everything." But I kept my distance. Forgiveness would not come easily. My heart still ached when I thought of Ruby. How was she? The anticipation of seeing her again kept my pulse racing. I knew the fight was not over yet. As Pattinson Global Trading gradually stabilized, revenue climbing, debts under control, the stock turning green again, I knew it was time to move to the next phase, not just rescue but counterattack. I could not let Kyson Witherspoon walk away untouched after everything he had done. Swallowing the Pattinson empire and worse, turning Ruby into a prisoner in her own life. My heart pounded every time I thought of him, that smug man with the arrogant smile from a year ago. I launched a covert investigation aimed straight at the heart of the Witherspoon Group. This was no child's game. I knew I was stepping into a dangerous war where one mistake could bring everything crashing down. I sat in my new CEO office overlooking the New York skyline and called my most trusted associates. "We start now," I said over the phone, voice low but resolute. The tension surged. Would we find the evidence? Or had Kyson buried it too deep? I mobilized my entire international network of lawyers, independent auditors, and partner funds to tear apart every cash flow, contract, and shell company in the Witherspoon empire. It was a labyrinthine system. Thousands of transactions stretching from the US to Asia and Europe. I hired top specialists from London and Singapore, people who had worked with me on massive deals, to rip everything open. We worked around the clock in a secret Manhattan office, computer screens glowing with data. "Trace the cash flow from this shipping contract," I ordered, pointing at a dense Excel sheet. By cross-referencing shipping records, container counts, vessel routes with logistics invoices, insurance policies, and cross-border payment chains, the anomalies began to surface. A contract for cargo from China to the US, supposedly worth millions, turned out to be completely fictitious. No real goods, only fake paperwork used for money laundering. Then more. Tax evasion through Cayman shell companies, money funneled straight into Kyson's pockets untaxed. My pulse raced when the first solid proof appeared, an internal email from Kyson's assistant. "Transfer $5 million through the ghost company. Keep it off the IRS radar." Piece by piece, we built the picture, tension rising with every discovery. The process took weeks, but each new revelation fueled both exhilaration and rage. I remembered the sleepless nights alone with cold coffee pouring over data. "You'll pay, you bastard," I whispered, imagining Kyson's face when it all collapsed. We uncovered thousands of fake invoices, marine insurance, international payments, and exposed tens of millions in money laundering and tax evasion. One midnight, the audit team called. "Hudson, we've got it. Ironclad proof of laundering through fake logistics contracts." My heart soared, but I stayed calm. "Excellent. Keep digging. We need it airtight. The suspense was excruciating. If we were discovered too early, Kyson could strike back with his power. I shared information only with a tiny circle of trusted people and stored everything on encrypted drives. Once we had an airtight dossier, hundreds of pages of emails, invoices, bank records, I quietly delivered the entire package to financial crime authorities and market regulators. Almost simultaneously, damaging stories about Witherspoon Group exploded across the financial press. I leaked portions anonymously to the Wall Street Journal and Financial Times. First headline: Witherspoon Group accused of laundering via sham logistics contracts. The market reacted instantly. Retail shareholders panicked and dumped stock. The price plunged 20% in a single day. Institutional investors pulled out. Cancellation calls flooded in. Witherspoon's market value lost billions. Banks launched emergency credit reviews and froze lending. Kyson and his family were forced into non-stop press conferences. I watched on TV as he stood at the podium, suit perfect but face ashen, trying to deflect. These are baseless rumors. We will sue whoever is spreading them. He denied everything, but his voice wavered, eyes avoiding the cameras. The more he spoke, the deeper journalists dug, exposing contradictions. One reporter asked, "Then explain the ghost transactions with the Cayman entity?" Kyson stammered, "The stock fell another 10%. I smiled grimly, but the tension rose. A cornered animal bites hardest. Headlines multiplied. Witherspoon accused of years-long tax evasion. Regulators moved in. Internal chaos erupted. Senior staff resigned. Partners fled. Parallel to the corporate war, I secretly gathered evidence of Kyson's domestic abuse against Ruby. This was the most critical part, not just destroying his company, but freeing her from hell. I couldn't wait, so I started the moment Pattinson was stable. Through my lawyer network, I accessed Ruby's private medical records, photographs of bruises on her arms, cuts on her face, diagnoses listed as blunt force trauma. My heart broke seeing those images. My gentle Ruby eyes swollen in the hospital photos. Tears rolled down my face. The suspense was unbearable. Would this be enough for a court? I hired a top-tier New York private investigation firm, discreet surveillance specialists, to track Kyson's daily life. They documented his open affairs, photos of him embracing a young woman at upscale bars, nights coming home late ignoring Ruby. Reports confirmed. Subject maintains strict control over wife, no outside contact, phone monitoring. I approached former household staff with offers of protection and generous payment. After hesitation, several agreed to testify about the beatings. One maid said, "I heard screams from the bedroom, then saw bruises on Madam. Sir said she fell." Those words cut like knives. All evidence, medical photos, surveillance footage, sworn statements, was compiled, vetted by the best lawyers, and handed to the family attorney to file for divorce and domestic violence charges. When the dossier was complete, Ruby officially filed for divorce from Kyson. My heart raced. The suspense was unbearable as we awaited the court's response. Kyson, as expected, struck back viciously. He went public, smearing my name, accusing me of having an affair with Ruby from the beginning and orchestrating a conspiracy to destroy him and his company. At a press conference, he declared, "Hudson Wright not only had an illicit relationship with my wife long ago, but is using money and hidden connections to manipulate the market and launch a deliberate campaign to ruin me and Witherspoon Group." The media frenzy exploded. Pattinson CEO accused of affair with rival's estranged wife. For a short, brutal period, I became the prime target, threatening emails, slander flooding social media. My pulse hammered. The suspense was excruciating. This was his final, desperate blow. I had to fight on both the business and legal fronts alone, staying silent in public and letting the lawyers handle every document. "Don't say a word. Let the evidence speak," my counsel advised. I sat in my office watching the news, cold sweat on my forehead. The tension was unbearable. Would the courts believe us? Or would Kyson turn the tables? Those were days of constant dread, like a cornered animal waiting for the final blow. Every morning, the moment I opened my eyes, I rushed to check my email. Dozens of anonymous threats. Touch Kyson again and you're dead. The financial press dug into my past, hunting for any stain they could find. I knew Kyson was behind it all. He was paying off journalists and spreading rumors to shift attention from his own crimes. I stayed silent as my lawyers advised, but inside I was burning. Work at Pattinson continued, meetings, contracts, but my mind was always in the courtroom. How was Ruby holding up? Could she endure the pressure? My heart ached. The suspense was unbearable as I waited for the trial day when the truth would either be revealed or everything would collapse. The divorce trial unfolded in a suffocating atmosphere of direct confrontation. The courthouse in downtown New York, an old imposing building with echoing marble corridors, felt like a war drum with every footstep. I sat in the back row trying to stay unseen, but my heart pounded like thunder when Ruby walked in. She was thinner, brown hair tied back simply, face pale, yet those green eyes still held strength. Kyson sat on the opposite side, black suit immaculate, expression icy, but I noticed his clenched fists and the sweat on his forehead. The lawyers clashed fiercely. His side tried to paint Ruby as a disgruntled wife manipulated by Hudson Wright. Then Ruby was called to the stand. She spoke of the suffocating control, phone monitoring, friends cut off, forbidden to leave the house alone. She described the verbal abuse, the beatings when she resisted, the bruises she hid under long sleeves. The entire courtroom fell silent. I sat in the back, heart twisting with every word, tears rolling down my face unnoticed. One question consumed me. Would her truth be enough to sway the judge? Medical reports were presented, photos of purple bruises on her arms, cuts on her cheek. Our lawyers played a secretly recorded audio from a former staff member, Kyson's voice snarling, "Shut your mouth or I'll beat you to death." Testimony followed from maids and security guards. I saw Madam crying with fresh bruises. Faced with this airtight evidence, Kyson's defenses crumbled. He stammered, "It was an accident, she fell." But the judge's expression was one of clear disbelief. The trial lasted 3 grueling days. His lawyers kept trying to flip the narrative, accusing me of interfering in the marriage. But the evidence was overwhelming. Finally, the judge struck the gavel. The marriage between the parties is hereby dissolved. Mrs. Ruby Pattinson is restored to full personal freedom. Ruby sobbed in her seat. Kyson slammed the table in fury. The court simultaneously forwarded the entire domestic violence file to criminal prosecutors for further action. My heart raced with joy and suspense. Ruby was free. But the war was not over. At the same time, authorities officially opened a full investigation into Witherspoon Group's financial crimes. I had handed over the dossier long ago, and now it bore fruit. Accounts were frozen overnight, tens of millions locked down, triggering panic inside Witherspoon. Senior executives were hauled in for questioning. Kyson's own assistant broke under pressure and confessed to the fake transactions. I followed it all from a distance through the news. SEC launches probe into Witherspoon money laundering. Kyson fought back with top lawyers, but the evidence was ironclad. After 2 months of intense raids and interrogations, the verdict came. Kyson and key associates were indicted and convicted on charges of money laundering, tax evasion, and contract fraud. The criminal trial was swift. The mountain of proof, emails, fake invoices, witness testimony was insurmountable. Kyson was sentenced to prison. I watched on TV as his once smug face turned ashen, all arrogance gone. Witherspoon Group lost all market trust. Shareholders dumped stock, credit lines vanished, major contracts were canceled. Partners fled. We don't do business with criminals. Soon after, the company officially declared bankruptcy, ending an empire that had once seemed invincible. I read the Wall Street Journal headline: Witherspoon Empire collapses in fire sale. My heart pounded with grim satisfaction. He had lost everything just as he had tried to take everything from Pattinson. I sat in my office overlooking the city and exhaled. But the victory felt incomplete because my thoughts were with Ruby. How much had she suffered because of him? After overcoming the crisis and crushing Witherspoon Group, Pattinson Global Trading recovered strongly and began steady growth under my direct leadership. I worked relentlessly. New logistics routes, exclusive Asian partnerships, technology investments to optimize the supply chain. Revenue jumped 50% in the first quarter. The stock hit record highs. Employees admired me. Boss Hudson saved the company, and I held weekly meetings, motivated the teams, but my heart was always with Ruby. The suspense remained. How was she? Why hadn't she reached out? Robert and Kennedy repeatedly sought me out to apologize, acknowledging their past mistakes and expressing deep remorse for using their power to tear Ruby and me apart. One afternoon in my office, Robert entered, voice trembling. "Hudson, we were wrong. We were blinded by family interests and pushed Ruby into hell. Please forgive us." Kennedy wept. "We regret it so much. She sacrificed everything for you and we destroyed it all." I listened, emotions mixed. Rationally, I accepted their apology. Time had softened the sharpest hatred, but the wounds from that humiliating dinner and the forged goodbye letter still lingered, so I kept a certain distance. No warm embraces, no easy familiarity. Our relationship with Ruby's parents evolved into one of professional respect. Board meetings, strategy discussions, but never true closeness. Robert respected my decisions as an equal partner, no longer giving orders. Kennedy sent thank you gifts, but I accepted them politely without great warmth. I knew they carried guilt. Robert often looked at me with remorse during meetings, but the past could not be erased overnight. The suspense continued. Had they really changed? As for Ruby, after escaping that hellish marriage, she carried deep shame, trauma, and guilt over everything that had happened. I heard from Robert, "She doesn't want to see anyone, not even us." Ruby distanced herself from the family and chose to live quietly alone, healing in solitude, far from the glittering high-pressure world of the elite. She moved to a small house in the New York suburbs near a lake, where she could read, paint, and mend her heart. Robert said, "She wants to start over, away from business." I waited anxiously for news of her. Was she all right? Did she ever think of me? I did not push, did not try to force contact or pressure her to return. I simply watched over her from afar, arranging everything she needed to feel safe and financially secure. I hired discreet security, sent money through anonymous accounts, support from a friend so she could pay bills and live comfortably. Every act of help was silent. She never knew I was the one behind it. I followed her progress through private investigator reports, walking by the lake, reading under trees, smiling more often. My heart warmed yet ached. The love for Ruby remained untouched, hidden beneath silence and respect for her choices. She needs time to heal, I told myself, but the suspense lingered, waiting for the day she might come back. A year had passed since the day Ruby left to heal on her own, and I had learned to live with that longing as part of my life. In the early months, I buried myself in Pattinson Global Trading, new logistics routes, massive international contracts, anything to fill the emptiness inside. The company flourished, revenue soared, but every night when I returned to my apartment, I sat by the window watching New York's glittering lights and wondered, "How are you, Ruby? Are you happy?" I lived quietly, morning runs, late night reading, and silent waiting. A quiet suspense threaded every day. Will you ever come back? Or have you chosen a new life without me? I still received reports from the private investigator. She paints by the lake, her face gradually brightens, but her eyes still carry a distant sadness. My heart raced with every update, fragile hope rising, yet I dared not hope too much. Then one calm afternoon, while I was sitting in my usual cafe near the office reviewing financial reports, the door opened and Ruby walked in. My heart stopped. She was no longer the fragile, broken woman from the trial. Thin, red-eyed. She was a woman who had walked through fire and learned to stand tall again. Her long brown hair fell loose. A simple pale blue dress hugged her figure, and her smile was gentle yet steady. She looked around the cafe, then her gaze settled on me. In that instant, the world blurred. Clinking spoons, customers' chatter, everything faded. Only she and I remained. I stood, hands trembling, barely able to speak her name. She smiled, voice warm but slightly hesitant. "Hudson, it's been a long time. How have you been?" We sat. The air crackled with suspense. I looked at her, emotions flooding. She was more beautiful than ever, but her eyes still carried the scars of old wounds. "I thought I would never see you again," I whispered, heart pounding. We spent the entire afternoon speaking openly, acknowledging that we had once loved deeply, hated deeply, and hurt each other to the core. We laid everything bare, no hiding, no evasion. I confessed, voice hoarse. "I hated you for that letter. I thought you had betrayed me." Ruby cried. "I never betrayed you, Hudson. I sacrificed myself to protect you, but I hated myself for being weak, for letting Kyson control me." We admitted the wounds. I spoke of the humiliation of being thrown out of the estate, the nights wandering Manhattan. She spoke of the bruises, the nights of terror. We both understood that some scars never fully disappear. Time only softens them, reminders of hard-won lessons. The atmosphere was charged as we touched the darkest corners. We laughed through tears. That raw honesty felt like lifting a crushing weight. Instead of rushing back together as if nothing had happened, we chose to start over as two new people. The past became a lesson, not chains. We learned from our mistakes and pain to build something stronger. The meetings that followed were simple. Walks in Central Park where we once dated, quiet dinners in small restaurants, sharing our new days. No pressure, no expectations. Suspense rose with every encounter. Would she stay or walk away again? But she stayed, and love slowly bloomed again, no longer reckless. Another year passed in slow, quiet, steady companionship. We met weekly, then daily. Lakeside walks, cooking together, sharing dreams. She grew healthier, smiled more. I learned to open up, to hide nothing. When we were truly ready, after deep late-night talks, after the wounds had slowly healed, we decided to build a life together. Our wedding was intimate and warm. Nothing extravagant, no media, only the people who truly mattered. We chose a small garden in the suburbs under blooming cherry trees, the same place we had secretly gotten engaged years before. No lavish gown, no grand reception. She wore a simple white dress. I wore my familiar gray suit. Only 20 guests, friends from the fund, a few Pattinson colleagues, and family. The air was charged with emotion as we exchanged vows. "I promise to love you forever and walk with you through every storm life brings." She cried, "I promise to stay by your side for the rest of my life." Everyone applauded, but for me only she existed. My parents, who had always kept a low profile despite being quietly among the wealthiest in finance, appeared publicly for the first time to bless their son and daughter-in-law, to the astonishment of Ruby's family. My father, Thomas Wright, owner of a fund even larger than Wright Capital Partners, and my mother, Eleanor, who manages the family fortune, entered the garden dressed simply but radiating quiet authority. Robert and Kennedy stared in shock. "That's right," my father said with a smile. "Hudson has always been our greatest pride." They embraced us. "Son, after everything you've been through, you deserve this happiness." The moment was filled with wonder. Ruby's parents were stunned, but then warmth followed as both families hugged. Ruby's parents finally accepted me fully as their son-in-law. No more prejudice, no more control. As both families sat together under the trees sharing stories, old grudges and class prejudices quietly faded. No more whispers about status, only family. The suspense melted into peace. Looking back on the entire journey, from simple love to cruel separation, from collapse to counterattack and rescue, I deeply understood every loss I had endured. I remembered that first dinner, my modest suit, Robert's sneers the night I was thrown out, the months of despair after her wedding, the war against Kyson, the sleepless nights planning. It felt like a long film full of tears and blood. But now, beside Ruby, I knew that money can buy power but not happiness. I had millions, control of Pattinson, but they meant nothing without her. Fame can dazzle the eyes but cannot replace character. Kyson was proof. He lost everything to blind ambition. True love can only exist with freedom, respect, and genuine sacrifice, the way Ruby sacrificed for me, the way I waited for her a whole year. The most expensive lesson I learned is that no business interest, no social status is worth trading for one person's happiness and dignity. Robert once believed a family alliance mattered more than his daughter's love. The result was hell for Ruby and bankruptcy for Pattinson. Kyson thought money and power could buy anything. He ended up in prison. In this glittering world, dignity and happiness are the most precious things of all. No deal, no title is worth sacrificing them. And after all the tragedy, what remains is love matured through suffering and a future built on understanding and forgiveness. We live simply in the little house by the lake. She paints. I work remotely. We cook together, walk together. No more storms, only peace. I watch her sleep beside me, heart full of warmth, and know the journey was worth it. The suspense of the past has become hope for the future, a family, children one day, and love that will never die.